and this is The End Show. And I'm your host, Gus Summers. It's good to be back with you today. We got another great show. We have a great in-studio guest, and of course, we have another guest that is calling online right now. We have Mr. Lance Henriksen online and Mr. Joe Maddrey in studio. Gentlemen, thank you for coming in today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Man, thank you. Thanks for the interest. You know, really.
Oh,
we got a lot of good stuff going on.
Absolutely. I know you have a comic book, which is one of the reasons we brought you guys in. You have a book. You have, of course, your wonderful pottery that we have to talk about. You got a great interest in that. But you, Joe, and Lance, you've been together now, Joe, you were saying, for a few years now, right?
Yeah, the first thing we did together was a horror documentary called Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue that I wrote and produced, and Lance did the narration for that. So we met on that, and we've kind of been working together pretty consistently ever since then.
So whose idea was it?
You could call us writing partners now.
Writing partners. Wow. I know Joe was saying that, Lance, that you know each other fairly well now, that you guys are like good comrades.
You know what's happened? It's pretty amazing. This comic has been such an obsession, and we've been working very close with Tom Maddrey, but it's been the most unusual experience I've ever had. I think I'm prouder of this than just about anything I've ever done.
And I know, now correct me if I'm wrong, I remember from the lecture that you gave that this was just an idea that you had while driving along and you found yourself in a canyon, am I correct?
Yeah, up in Telluride, Colorado, yeah. But it's really progressed way further than that. You know, it's developed and evolved, and between Joe and I and Tom, we've certainly changed the whole complexion of it, and it's very alive, very alive.
Joe, when did Lance bring you the story, or is it something that you kind of saw on his desk? Well, let me ask before that, did you write the book first and then the comic? Am I correct?
We spent a year writing the book and then about a year traveling around and promoting it. And towards the end of that second year, we were down at Comic-Con in San Diego, and we met Mike Richardson. Well, Lance met Mike Richardson, who's the head of Dark Horse, the owner of Dark Horse. And Mike asked him if he ever thought of writing a comic, and Lance jumped on it. He already had an idea ready, so things kind of took off from there and have been happening pretty fast ever since.
So when he...
I think the biggest thing that Dark Horse has given us, not only the opportunity to write the comic and for them to produce it, but they let us work in a way that it's not normally done. What normally happens is a script is written, it's passed off to an artist, and they never really talk again. And what we wanted to do was have a process where we could make this thing come alive. From day to day. We Skype so often that I feel like we all live together.
I mean, you Skype so often. I love that. So you got to see each other. So this became a daily process while you were developing the story.
It still is a daily process. I mean, we're still we still have 2 issues to finalize. So we were all on Skype for about half the day yesterday. I mean, it's an ongoing thing.
It's Lance. When you found yourself in Telluride, and you came up with the story, because it was originally intended for a script, am I correct?
Yeah, it was, and the ironic thing is it's so much better now because I remembered the whole script, but the idea was a much broader and more poignant thing than I realized once we started working on it again together, with Joe and Tom, and it's it's been resonating like crazy. I mean, the reviews we've gotten are very, it's confirmation because they're getting the story and they're very excited about what is the second comic going to be and the third and so on. And we have 5 comics in all that will eventually have been out. And it's such confirmation. I'm really, again, Joe was saying something funny that he was so excited that he was like walking on air and didn't know why. When the comic opened, it opened on 12/12/12, and I was in Detroit making a film, and I felt the same way. I was on the set, and I felt like I was going to the red carpet tonight or something. And the truth of it is, it was all of that work that we had done that kept us so excited about this thing. I mean, I don't mean to sound Pollyanna. It's just a feeling of kind of euphoria.
Seeing a project come to fruition and come to basically to an end in some point.
Yeah, opening nights are tough.
Well, especially, I mean, if it's the opening night of a movie and you go to the first screening, you're there in an audience. You get to hear how people are reacting. I mean, we put out a comic, and people are picking it up at their local comic shop, all around the country, and we don't get that immediate reaction. I mean, I think we had some reviews posted around the internet that night, but yeah, the day was tough because it was really just sitting around waiting and in a way not knowing quite what you're waiting for or when it's going to come.
I had a unique experience. I mentioned the comic to the crew on the movie I was doing, and suddenly there was a stampede. They were all heading out at lunch to find comic stores that had the comics, and it was really fun. I mean, at least I had that. They were excited, and when they read it and they saw it, the producers were getting mad because the guys were supposed to be lighting and they were reading the comic.
They were so enthralled with the story and everything. Well, now were they just excited that Lance Henriksen and Joe Maddrey had come out with a comic, that you ventured into something else and they really wanted to see what the story was about?
Can you imagine this much excitement over a comic? I mean, I'm telling you, it's really happened. Now, of course, they're selling out everywhere, and that's a kind of a problem. They want to get it out there, get it in people's hands. So there's a wonderful rush on to get these comics.
So Joe, is it everything that you hoped?
Oh yeah.
Well,
oh yes.
I love the project. I mean, I can't really reflect on it yet. I can't be objective about it yet. I mean, we're still in it. We still have 2 issues to finalize, and and there still actually is a little bit of room for things in issue 5 in the ending to change. For the wording to change. So I'm still in that world. My head is still in that world. I really can't. I can't reflect on it yet. It's too soon.
Yeah, you don't want to know the ending, believe me, because it'd be like this is when you see a pretty girl and you see her hair and her hands and her smell and everything. You don't really, you're all excited, but you don't really want to. You want to kind of postpone the final thing,
Right. You want to kind of just enjoy the moment, enjoy the progression of it.
Every single moment, yeah, exactly.
So let me ask, now that you see it in a comic book form, would you consider making it into a feature? Or am I jumping too soon?
Well, look, there's no mistake that we made 5 issues, which equals, 20 pages an issue.
Yes.
That adds up to a script, So, but the worst thing you could do, I think, to fans of comics is to say, well, we want a movie, and then disappoint them.
Yes.
I mean, that was said to me very early in the process, and I realized they're right.
Yes.
And so once they've all come out, and there's a trade version, we'll see what happens. I mean, I have very high hopes about it.
Well, we've had to learn a different medium, so I mean, we have to make it work for this medium, and like I said, it's too soon to think beyond what we're doing. I mean, writing a comic is completely different from trying to write a screenplay. So
we're gonna all drink a lot of champagne and take a nap after this is all done.
Again, enjoying the moment, right, for what it is.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. The comic's going to be coming out once a month now.
Oh,
So
okay.
the first one is out, and the second one will come out on the 9th of January. And then from then on, it's every month, you know.
Okay. So for the next few months, there'll be one coming out every month. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you going to be taking it on the comic book circuits? Are you going to be, because I know you guys already do that, you're going to be promoting that this year, 2013?
Bet I will. There's nothing better than meeting the tribe members and discussing. You know, I mean, I love to do panels, and like what we're doing now, it's great fun.
Right, right. And now you have additional ammunition with the comic book, the book. That's amazing. So you're going to have an even busier schedule this coming year.
It's been a good year.
Joe, are you ready for your schedule to change like that?
Well, it's not going to be changing. It's sort of it's a continuation
Of what this year was?
well, and last year and the year before. I mean, it all feels connected to me. We haven't slowed down or stopped. We just keep going.
You know, there's nothing like a great idea to drag you along. You know, I think one of the things that has happened to Joe and Tom and I, and people have changed for quite a while.
Right.
And that's when you get confirmation from some big directions
Yes.
in a project that you're doing, it gives you energy.
Right. Right. That's fantastic. You know, and I'm so excited that you guys were able to come in because, you know, when I saw the lecture over at Long Beach Comic Con and I was taking a look at some of the pictures, I thought this is going to be great. I love how you talked about it. You know, I appreciate you guys coming in. I know we got 3 more segments to still talk about the book, more comics, so much. Hey, appreciate you taking the time, Joe, and Lance. Thank you for taking the time too as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Now, this is Gus Summers, and you're listening to The In Show, and we have in-studio guests, Mr. Joe Maddrey and Mr. Lance Henriksen, and we are talking comic books, and we're going to be talking, of course, about their book and upcoming things for this coming year. So you hang in there, and we're going to be right back. And this is The In Show. And I'm your host, Gus Summers. It's good to be back with you today. We got another great show. We have a couple of great in-studio guests. We have Mr. Lance Henriksen and Mr. Joe Maddrey. Gentlemen, thank you again for being with us.
You're welcome, buddy.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, you bet. You know, we left off talking about the comic. I know it must be an exciting thing to do something that is different than what you normally do. Joe, I know you're an author, and of course Lance is a great movie star, TV star, and potter. And now here comes an idea for a comic. Something completely outside of what you're accustomed to. Did it take a little time to kind of get into the groove, or was it just, boom, we got this?
What do you think, Joe?
Well, I think we had the advantage of having Tom Mandrake on our side, who's been sort of coaching us through it. So.
Yeah, because we didn't know the stages, and now we do. After the first comic, we really knew.
Oh, okay. So
it's really the real major event is the communication and the connection. I think I always love the idea of connecting with an audience, whether it be movies or whatever, and especially comics, because it always seems that they are a fringe audience, and what we're trying to pull in is people that normally don't read comics, and ours is its nature might do that. So if we can get that audience that normally doesn't read comics, it's going to be a great adventure, that's for sure.
So give them a story and something that broadens their appeal to bring them into reading the comics.
Right, it's resonating like that, and I want to see. It's only been out a week.
Yes.
And I really want to see after a while, how that reveals itself. I'm very excited about it.
About how people respond to the story as it goes on, because in my mind at least, that's the second half of the process. I mean, even when our creative process is over, how people are responding to it, what elements they pick up on, and what really means something to them is sort of the second half of the process, and it's exciting to be able to hear that.
Right.
Yeah, there's no pandering involved in this comic, I'll tell you. It really is talking about it's sort of the best we all have to offer, whether it be the writing or the art. Tom Maddrey said something that really moved me at one point. He said that this is the comic he wants to be remembered for, which I thought was a very bold statement. Yeah. And I think that that's the kind of commitment he has, you know, so Joe and I feel very lucky about it.
So all of you brought a passion to it, and to make this memorable. That's amazing.
I don't really know if I'll ever do another one. You know, I mean, the point is that this was something we really had to and wanted to tell. You know, I mean, and how many of those stories do you have? I don't know, because we're not there yet. You know, we're not done.
Right.
And at the end of it, maybe the compulsion will overtake me, and I'll have to do another one. But I don't know. I just don't know.
This could just be your pinnacle. This is it, and forget the sequels and everything, and you made the one shot and leave it at that.
Well, there was a real ironic thing that happened. I was doing a movie in the process of being an actor, and I still couldn't get the comic out of my mind. You know, it was as if I had a couple of extra brain cells or something. It really worked. So again, that added to the apprehension and the excitement of when it was coming out. I was in Detroit, of all places.
And it was just there, the story just kept coming to mind, and you knew that you had to make it somehow?
It wouldn't let me go. It really wouldn't. I was wondering what Joe was doing, what Tom was doing, and you know, because I was in a hotel where they actually did have a conference room so I could Skype or email. Almost destitute in the sense of I had to use my cell phone, which is ridiculous.
And also, Detroit's sort of the perfect setting to get your mind into that post-apocalyptic story, which is kind of what To Hell You Ride is.
You know, I was playing a guy who was looking for immortality, so that left me open to a lot of philosophy ponderings. You know what I mean?
Especially nowadays, you know, you have so many different philosophies and stories about immortality, you know, coming into us in real life. So you think that this story is poignant? You think it's a perfect timing in your life and just in life in general for this story to come out, this comic?
Well, I think all art is based on the circumstances of your life in that era. And I think right now, you know, tomorrow is supposed to be the end of the world according to the Mayans. And in our second comic, we wrote a line inside the comic when you first open it. It'll say, well, if you're reading this, the world didn't end. You know?
Right. If you're waking up on Saturday morning with the hangover or what have you, you know, the world is still continuing.
So there is a climate of anticipation and fear about where we're headed and what's going on, because there's a lot going on in the whole world. And the part that I was playing, and you know, I was playing a surgeon in this movie that I was doing, and one of the issues, it's called needle stick. And one of the issues was, on the planet, 800,000 people a year get stuck accidentally with needles. You know, whether they be caretakers or firemen or police or whatever. And the scary part of that is the possibility of, you know, hepatitis A or C or HIV. And so when you're looking at global things like that, in terms of contact, you know, you suddenly realize that, wow, why am I looking global? And I think the world is more global now.
Right. Yeah, the world has pretty much become smaller. It's more interconnected.
Yeah, it is. And that way, we're the more contact we make with each other, the more stories there are.
You know, that's a great point. I know you've had a long career in Hollywood, and you do a excessive amount of traveling for that. Have you, I'm sure you have, when you've gone to different countries, have there been stories that really have stuck out that you thought, man, this would be a great comic or script or what have you?
Yeah, with every different culture, there's a kind of a theme running through what their life is like. Yeah. I mean, their reaction to things are different. You know, especially, you know, when I've been to Africa and I've been to Romania and Bulgaria and I've been all over Australia and all over the world, and I spoke to Maoris and Hawaiians, and I mean, and I'm filled to the brim with potential work that I could do the rest of my life, probably. Whether it be in movies or writing, and all the associates that I've met over the years, they also have stories, and it's I want to be a storyteller. I guess that's what it's boiling down to. Because I think the only valuable thing in the world is connection. And from the earliest times, sitting by a fire and telling stories is connection. Like what we're doing on the radio right now.
Yes. Getting the information out, getting the story out to other people who can connect to it.
Yeah, and all of our ways of talking tell people who we are. It resonates on that level, even if they didn't understand the words you were saying.
Yes, yes. So you think at this point, with the comic nearly being done, that comics may be a new medium for you in the new future?
It already is. I mean, right now it is.
Yes.
I mean, I kind of live in the now a little bit. You know what I mean? It's an important thing.
Yes.
I try to take baby steps to get things done rather than looking too far in the future.
Right. And so taking those big giant leaps and missing a little bit, taking a step at a time.
Yeah, Joe could have an answer for that one.
I'm surprised we're doing it now. I can't think about the next one. I'm still sitting around going, where the hell did this come from in the first place? How did we end up doing this now?
How did we get here? Oh, of course. And
well, you know what happened. Joe and I worked together on my biography, and he talked me into that one.
And you talked me into this one. I guess that's how we got here. There's the answer.
There it is. We're perfect.
And what happened was Joe and I realized we didn't want to do, pretentious photographs of look who I'm standing with, to be in a biography.
Right.
We wanted it to resonate more closely. And Joe came up with the idea of using comic book artists, because he had just worked with a guy named Steve Niles.
Yes.
And all the comic book guys that Steve Niles got a hold of, they all wanted to be in the book.
Wow.
And that was the introduction, really, to the whole comic book world.
Yes.
And here we are.
From those little baby steps like you were talking about into this grander step of the comic. That perfect segue, because I got to take a quick commercial break, because I do want to talk about your biography, and as I know Joe had mentioned some of the artwork when we met at a Comic-Con. So definitely want to talk about that in our next segment. Again, Joe, Lance, thank you for, taking the time. Sure appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome, buddy.
Glad to be here.
All right. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. Hey, well, this is Gus Summers, and you've been listening to The In Show. And we have in-studio guests, Mr. Lance Henriksen and Mr. Joe Maddrey. And we're going to have a lot more of them still in our next segment. So you hang in there, which is going to begin right now. And this is The In Show. And I'm your host, Gus Summers. It's good to be back with you today. We got another great show. We have in-studio guests, Mr. Lance Henriksen and Mr. Joe Maddrey in studio. Gentlemen, again, thank you for coming in. And Lance, thank you for calling and taking time out. Want to talk about a little bit about your autobiography. We
met doing a horror documentary and just sort of stayed in touch for about a year after that. And one day I worked up the nerve to call up Lance and suggest writing a biography. And it took a little convincing.
You know what was scary about it is I wondered how truthful I could be. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We all have some very fancy skeletons in the closet, And I was thinking, I wonder what this is going to be like, because I'd always thrown people off with the idea of doing that by saying it's not over yet.
Right.
So, but Joe has a real honesty about him and a perspective on things, and I felt very safe with him. I know it sounds like I'm like a wilting lily or something, but what I really meant was, I want to put this in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to put it in the book, and I want to p I didn't want it to become every biography that I ever read from an actor didn't appeal to me very much.
Yes.
And I didn't know where this was going to go. And we had made an agreement very early that if it was a lot of BS at halfway through it, that we were willing to walk away from it, just throw it away and not look back. Joe's skills are so great, and the kind of communication we had kept growing and getting better, and then finally we were very happy with it. You know what I mean? Because when you're talking about your life, it's so subjective that I wasn't really being a lot of help at first.
It started kind of just flowing naturally, talking about yourself. Now,
yeah, it's like that joke, you know. I mean, I'm really tired of talking about myself. What do you think of me?
And I'm methodical, and I had done a lot of work, and I was happy to answer that. You know, I mean, I had sort of a framework, and we just we went back and forth for months until we ended up with something we were both happy with.
Wow.
You know, Joe watched every movie that I had ever done.
Did you?
Mean, that tells you something.
I think there were 2 or 3 that I couldn't track down.
Yeah.
Although I've seen at least one of those since doing the book. But
which 2?
Don't tell them the titles, though. People go look it up.
Yeah, I remember I hadn't seen Dark End of the Street until after.
Oh, that's not bad. We got nominated for an Emmy for that.
Yeah,
But
that was a good. You had a great scene by the quarry in that. I really liked that.
Yeah.
I think that sums up, your career so beautifully, because I was just talking with somebody, and I was talking about Lance and Joe being on the show, and something I said was, I followed your career for years, and some of my favorite movies, Stone Cold, Chains, oh, fantastic. And I think we talked about Johnny Handsome. That was one of my favorite roles, and something I had mentioned is that Lance Henriksen, there are very few actors that fall into the category that he does, because not only you have such depth that you can lead a series, be a leading man, and a supporting role with such fervor and such believability that it's...
Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. A lot of people are one-dimensional. That's not you. And I can only probably name no more than maybe 5 or 10 actors that, in my memory, who can actually pull off roles the way you do.
Oh, thank you. My mother's favorite movie was Stone Cold. Yeah, she said, I love that Chains. And I said, I took her to the opening up in San Francisco, because that's where she lived, and we went to the theater, and she spilled popcorn all over me in the lobby, because when we were coming out, she hadn't finished her popcorn and was saying, I love that Chains, and was dumping it all over the place in her excitement, And I said, Mom, the guy is a psychopathic biker killer. What do you love about him? And she looked at me and said, literally, I wasn't always a good girl. I mean, I had 2 women tell me that over the years.
Right.
That they look at me, and we're talking about 7-year-old women or older.
Yes.
They're like, I love that Chains. And I was like, okay, I surrender, man. I can't get to the bottom of that one. I don't want to know.
And I think just from my personal experience, watching the movie. I mean, I saw it on the the big screen, and even have a copy of it. There's just a depth to the character. It wasn't for me, of course, just from my viewpoint, it wasn't just a sadistic killer. He was thoughtful. He had a plan. He had these things he wanted to execute, through the movie. And you had to kind of get into that person's head to figure out why he's doing what he's doing. I think you portrayed that person beautifully, and I think that's how you do all your characters.
Thank you very much for that. I try. I give it my all. I don't care what movie it is. I mean, if I say yes, that means yes.
Yes.
That doesn't mean I'm going to ride an electric
right
bucking horse. You know, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, Joe, when you were watching Lance's movies, what did you get out of it? When you're watching them, because you're the person who then sat down with him, and got even deeper because you start asking him questions and delving into his life.
Well, originally I think the book in my mind was going to be primarily about the movies, because I didn't have a sense right off the bat of how forthcoming Lance was going to be. I thought, maybe you give me a quote for each movie, about something you remember, but I didn't know how in depth you were going to get. And as we talked, I think it really became a book that was a lot about creative process and about the way that you really don't distinguish between art and life. And that's not just the, to me at least, it's not just the sort of method acting cliche where you get into a role and you can't tell the difference. It's a different thing where just you're living those roles on some level, and you're really open to thinking and acting like another person. That you have that openness. I guess over the course of writing the book, I started to think of you, Lance, as a little bit of a like a risk addict. Not in the sense that you want to go skydiving or take these big physical risks, or that's what you're thriving on, but that a thing really isn't worth doing unless, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. You're going to do it 100%. And that, I think, is why the biography works. I think that's why the comic is working, because it's really about, if we're going to do this, let's really do this. Let's get into it and let's go for broke. And
let's take risks. That's a great way of putting it, Joe, because that's really what it feels like. And sometimes you can't get people to jump off the cliff with you. In our case, all of our strong points are working together. A lot of times, I think the worst circumstance is when you get a writer who's also directing. And in a sense, what happens is they defend their material to the point where you have to really work with them to try to get them to release you into some kind of freedom, because otherwise they're not going to get from me the nuances. Usually what happens to me is a week into the movie, any movie that I do, I know more about the character than the writer does, because he can't possibly put all those hats on. And the character that they give me to do, I'm obsessed on it, and I end up, gathering all the information I can that would be available to me while I'm making the movie as choices that are potentially going to be, really helpful to the movie, but through the character and through what those scenes are. So it's complicated, but it is. I love the risking. That's a great way of putting it, Joe. I love the risking because that's what we all do. If I just walked up to somebody, a beautiful waitress at a counter, it takes risk to engage her. And in life it takes risk. And so why would it stop if you're doing a movie? I don't want to just recite the lines.
Put something more into each role, and that.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's amazing. You put it in such a thing, like what you were saying, that skydiving, you want to take a risk, so you see him taking those risks in those roles. Fantastic. that explains a whole lot.
I'm glad I came on this show, darn it.
Oh, me too. I'm glad you guys, you took the time. Again, thanks for coming in. We got to take a quick commercial break, but it'll be a quick one because we still got one more segment and still a lot more to cover. Joe, Lance, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. Hey, well, this is Gus Summers, and you're listening to The In Show, and we have in-studio guests, Mr. Lance Henriksen and Mr. Joe Maddrey. We're going to have a lot more of them in our last segment, so you hang in there. We'll be right back. All right, and this is Gus Summers, and you're listening to The In Show, and you have in-studio guests, Mr. Lance Henriksen and Mr. Joe Maddrey. Wow. So we covered a comic book. We covered the autobiography. Lance, I want to talk about your pottery.
Well, it's another kind of form of meditation. I think really what goes on when I make it, I love the search. Pottery is all about the search, for me anyway, and because I don't care if I sell even one cup. It has nothing to do with money or making money. I mean, I've donated a lot of pottery, like, to the Orchard Museum, and they have silent auctions, and that's all good. But I don't care about selling it. Really, what I need to do is do it for the pure pleasure of that search. I'm talking about splatters of glaze that happen by accident. Now I'll pursue it.
Yes.
And at that rate, I will never get to the end of the interest I have for ceramics.
And you were saying you were doing this since the 60s, am I correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I started in the 60s. To teach myself how to throw, I just started.
So were you somewhere in particular that you saw it and you thought, well, I want to try this? Or was it just...
No, it was, I think I saw a crackle bowl from China in a museum. And I thought, that is probably the most wonderful accidental thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
Someday want to do that. I mean, I already have a plan on how I can do it, and there are just so many elements to it that it's fire, water, and dirt, and time, and it just there's no end to the pursuit, which is great.
Right. So when your guests come over, like Joe, do you take them out and have them try it?
No, not yet. No, but I will.
So, Joe, yeah, he didn't take you out there to...
I'll try to stuck him into it.
I would have thought that would have been the first thing you would have had to do.
No, I haven't made any pottery with Lance.
No.
It will happen, though. I mean, unless Joe avoids me completely.
he can't now.
Well, once you get that studio set up, once you're going in there, I assume that I'm going to have to come in if I want to talk to you. Otherwise, you're going to be so immersed in that I just won't hear from you for weeks on end.
That's true. That's true. Normally, I went into my studio and I disappear for a couple of months, and it's a crazy thing. I mean, I love it. I feel like I feel like Thomas Edison looking for the light bulb.
Looking for that right design and everything, that perfect piece.
Well, all of it. I mean, all of it, because there was a time when ceramics were done in a town that had a clay pit, and that's why they were there, and because of the materials that were available.
Yes.
Right now in the world, you can get cobalt from South Africa, you can get yellow stains from China, or clay from England. I mean, all the materials are so abundant and so available that you would never run out of possible combinations of things. And I've actually had to boil it down to maybe 20 ingredients, and I can't do any more because there's too many combinations. If you could imagine a combination lock with 20 different numbers on it,
yes,
that you had to click in, the chances of opening that would be almost zero. And so I'm talking about opening up a communication with the materials. So that's my description of how timeless it is. I've been keeping notes, and I have about probably another 50 years worth of pottery ideas, and I don't know that I'm going to make it.
Oh, amazing. And I know you had once mentioned George Orr, that you were really interested in his life, and even possibly making a movie.
He was a potter down in Biloxi, Mississippi, back in the 1800s, and he was so ahead of his time in terms of his demeanor and how he was receiving the modern world. The modern, industrial world. He was right on the cusp of that, and he was an absolute romantic. I mean, in fact, he had 10 children, and he was a very funny guy and very determined. And I really want to play him. It's a great story. They called him the Mad Potter of Biloxi.
The Mad Potter of Biloxi. Is that the working title at the moment? Joe?
Imagine trying to pitch that to a studio. The minute you say pottery, they fall asleep. It's an automatic, falling asleep.
But the word mad helps a little.
Yeah, the Mad Potter, that's right.
Yeah, the Mad Potter bar, that works. Of course, they're thinking serial killer.
Yeah. So what do you think, Joe? You think it's a it's a working title?
I think I don't know if that's the working title. There's a good story there. I mean, I see a way into that story, but it's hard for when I say I can't even be objective and reflect on the comic yet. I mean, I certainly can't think about that project yet. We're neck deep in the comic right now.
Oh yeah, but once you get to the point where you actually have finished something together like this, it almost feels like anything is possible. So it's better to keep it that way right now, because this comic is so important to us. It's hard to believe that, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about a comic book.
It's amazing.
And I think that it's going to reach people like I started when I was talking about it. It will reach people, and that's really what the connection is all about.
It's a story. I mean, in a way, I don't even look at it. I mean, there's a lot of things about the comic medium as a medium that you can't do in film, you can't do in other mediums. But I mean, I tend to boil it down and just look at it and say, it's a story, and what's really valuable in a story is what you were saying earlier, is the ability to connect with other people through ideas, and that's it's pretty universal. I think there's some really universal ideas in the story. So I mean that if that's the case, then any story where that's the case ends up having a life of its own. You put it out there, and it becomes its own thing. It lives its own life.
It's a I'm sitting here. I'm listening to you two. You got a comic book, which is everyone's loving. You worked on the autobiography. You worked on two large projects in such an intimate way, because you got to know each other, and you got to know Lance, and you got to know a story of his that he's had for years. How's that impact you personally? Are you able just to sit back and have a drink? Or is there more of like a brotherly connection, since you know each other so well, and and worked with each other for the past few years?
Well, that certainly happened. There's a great deal of respect I have for Joe, and anyone that doesn't procrastinate and really works at something. It's a real sight to behold. I mean, because I've spent a great deal of my life around people that have goals. And really try, no matter what level it's on. And I have a great deal of respect for that, especially with Joe, because he's so articulate. He does great blogs, by the way. I mean, really great blogs. he did one on comics having nothing to do with ours. It was very illuminating for me, because I didn't realize he had all those thoughts about comics in general. And so it's always constant surprise. All kinds of constant surprises are being shared, because of, and I'm fortunate enough to be there. So it's great.
We both do the same thing in our own ways. I mean, when you always talk about preparing for a movie role as a period of gathering, where you're thinking about a script and a character from any angle you can, and you're just sort of taking in all of that information, and you aren't making any decisions yet, but you're just taking it all in. And that's been my process. While we've been doing the comic, it was the process before we were doing the book. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just you stay open to as much as you can. You take in as much as you can from wherever the information and ideas are coming from, and you try to be open to everything. It's a gathering process. That's what's exciting about doing anything creative. You're taking in as much life as you can, at one time, and being open to it. And
amazing. We're reaching the end. Unfortunately, I'm having such a great time, but I did want to find out about your comic. I know it's in comic book stores. I know you also have a blog for it online. Am I correct, Joe?
We have probably the one-stop shopping, if you're interested in the biography or the comic, is notbadforahuman.com. Not Bad for a Human's the name of the autobiography. And we have links on there to anything you want to know really about the biography, or if you want to order it from us, you can order a signed copies through that. And there's also quite a bit of information and reviews and everything else on the comic. So that's sort of our hub.
Wow. Again, Joe, Lance, thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it enough. Talk about your comic and your books.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. All right. Hey,
Thanks for having us, really. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Hey, well, this is Gus Summers, and you've been listening to The In Show. And we had in-studio guests, Mr. Joe Maddrey and Mr. Lance Henriksen. And they talked about their comics and their autobiography and, of course, a little bit about their life. And be sure to visit us at theinshow.com, where you'll be able to hear this interview once again. All right. So we'll catch you next time. And remember, Gus has left the building.